Connor, if you wanted to pop on just a minute and say hello and kind of tell us what you do at Claris and let everyone meet you, that'd be
Sure.
great.
Hello. Yes, thanks for the invite to this. I'm on the QA side for the FileMaker product line, so I'm looking for bugs, testing the new stuff coming, and also working very closely with our support department and a lot of uh, folks who use FileMaker just directly. Looking through the attendee list here, I think several of you I've had the pleasure of being able to meet in person, so good to see you again.
We've all been dealing with artificial intelligence, obviously, for quite a while now. Um, last year, I guess it would have been around last summer, as full access was coming around. One of the guys on our team, Mike Ross, is really involved with planning and putting the full access conference on. And so I was early on kind of thinking about doing a session, and I was at the same time struggling with learning some AI stuff. And so I ended up deciding to kind of combine those things and work on my AI education and work on a presentation for the full access conference at the same time. So this is the result of that. Last year, um, early last year and going into the summer, I would say was the first time I started becoming familiar with or aware of the idea of vibe coding. I think the terminology was just starting to come into play, and as an illustration of how quickly I think this arena is changing our business, the I think the term vibe coding is already starting to be supplanted by a more expansive idea of AI assisted coding or AI assisted dev frameworks. And I want to just mention that we're doing a lot of work in that area as a company, and that's the kind of area we're working on are those AI dev frameworks, agent assisted, spec driven, a lot of that kind of stuff. This presentation is really more of a vibe coding sort of approach that I was taking. I run Portage Bay. I'm not one of the lead developers, so this is more about my attempts to learn AI and doing it through a vibe coding approach and less a more spec driven best practices kind of approach. Um, so we all have to deal with FileMaker Server log analysis. When our clients have problems, the logs are where we have to go to try to figure out what's going on. FileMaker Server is pretty stable. We help manage or directly manage dozens, probably, I don't even know, 30, 40, 50 FileMaker servers. And most of them run day in, day out without any trouble, and we don't have to look at the logs, which is great. But once in a while, we have problems infrequently enough that frequent problems we all learn how to deal with. Infrequent problems are more challenging, and I've used some of the tools that are out there for log analysis. Some of the other Platinum partners have put together some different tools and blog posts for log analysis, and this slide deck has some resources towards the end for looking at that. Looking at some of those different sort of a bibliography of different references I used in this blog posts from other companies like DB Services, Soliant, etc. So these are all the FileMaker server logs. I'm probably leaving out a couple. Yeah, I think I put down there at the bottom some of the ones that I left out of this list, but FileMaker maintains a bunch of other log files besides these. For this presentation, I'm mainly looking at the access log, client stats log, event log, script event log, a little bit at the top stats log and the top call stats log. Not really, for this presentation, I'm not really looking at the web publishing log there. So my first thought with working with some of the AI models that are out there was just chatting directly with the models about the log files. I'll just give the log file to ChatGPT or whoever, and I will start chatting with it about what the information is in the log file. And that just doesn't work. I was doing some testing this morning and double checking some of my numbers, whether they've changed since I wrote some of this. And the information, the token limits in the big models, the legacy, or not legacy, foundation models, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, haven't changed that much. Anthropic just bumped the Claude context window to I think 1 million tokens, and but some of them are still. This is a search as of this morning. What Gemini thinks the token limits are on some of the different models. And then I did a quick check. I gave Claude a moderate sized access log file, and by moderate sized in this situation I mean 30 some megabytes, I think it was. And that log file, Claude said, was 9 million tokens. So it's not really practical to give your entire log file to Claude or ChatGPT and just start chatting with it and expect that the context window will encompass the entire log file. So the idea of just giving it the log file and starting to chat with it doesn't really fly. So what I started doing was playing around with, instead of trying to just chat with my log file, I started playing around with the AI's ability to help me code stuff that would let me do some log analysis. I decided to use Python, and I chatted with some of our other developers and asked ChatGPT actually, what should I use as a framework for working with Python? And one of my developers and ChatGPT agreed kind of, and I decided to use Flask as the framework for doing this work, so that I could have a Python-driven web app that would let me work with these scripts that I was writing. I started out doing all this in Visual Studio Code, VS Code, which the Copilot, the AI assist there, is using ChatGPT. I think you can use some other models in there, but that's what I started out using. Later in this process, after full access was over and I was continuing to do some work in this, I decided to switch to Claude. And the results of what we're going to see in this presentation are the original scripts, but reworked with a new user interface that Claude did. The first script I decided to do was intended to help me chat with the log files better. That was a simple script for truncating the log file to a user-defined number of days. So I'm going to go over to this app now and demonstrate that. So if I want to give it a log file, I can do that. So I'm just going to pick a log file here. And if I want to chat with it, I know I can't chat with it. That can't fit into the full context window. So I'm going to tell it that I just want to look at the last 7 days of this log file. And the Python script is truncating that file and downloading it. And so this is a log fragment of that access log for just the last 7 days. And if I wanted to chat directly with Claude or whatever about this access log file, I could now do it, because this I tested this yesterday, and this fragment is small enough now to fit inside the context window, and Claude can look at the entire document and chat and form references and correlations throughout the entire document. I was doing this yesterday in this log file for a client, actually, to track down a piece of information, and actually not the access log file. I was doing that in the event log file, but I could now, if I wanted to, tell Claude, review this log file and show me any unusual patterns that you might encounter. And in this log file, one of the things that it pointed out to me was that one of the machines, this one here, has an unusually high number of disconnects. So if I was trying to minimize the noise level in this log file and make it easier to manage, I might go to that Mac Mini and say, why is it disconnecting all the time? Probably it's just going to sleep would be my guess, but that would be one way you could use that the pattern recognition capabilities of the AI engine to help you analyze the log file and spot things that are easy to fix and makes the log file easier to manage. You might also find security issues there. One of the other things that Claude spotted was an unusual pattern of failed admin console logins. It happened to be ones that I know we did, so I wasn't a security problem, but could have been. I should have mentioned that I am not a Python coder. I couldn't I couldn't sit down and write Python code directly. It's not that complicated a language to look at visually. So if I can look at it and see what it's doing, but I couldn't write it. So being able to do this with ChatGPT or Claude's assistance for me is the only way that this was accomplished. So the tools I used, like I mentioned, I started out doing this in VS Code with Copilot. I later switched to Claude. The stack is Python Flask. I initially started out doing this strictly on my laptop, and I wasn't using GitHub at all. I'm a classic FileMaker developer. I've not traditionally used GitHub to manage version control with FileMaker apps. And so getting into this world, this different dev world where people have been using GitHub for version control for decades, is a little bit new for me, and I didn't start using it. As I've uh, as I as I've been using this as a learning opportunity, I started using GitHub. I've been using I don't know if anybody uses Udemy for training. I've been watching some GitHub training on Udemy. Um, I knew eventually I was going to be deploying it via Docker, so I installed Docker on my laptop and started using GitHub to manage the deployments from my local copy to the Docker copy. So right now I've got Docker running um, on my Mac, and this is another area where Claude was a big help. I didn't really do much of the Docker. I installed Docker, but beyond that, Claude did most of the configuration work for me. So my log analysis app is running in a Docker container locally on my laptop. But the copy that we're interacting with over here is a deployed copy on one of our Ubuntu servers. So I'm now using GitHub to manage the deployments to my local Docker container for testing, and then to the container on that Ubuntu server for quote unquote production deployment. And then I'm using Safari and Chrome for testing and all. So I'll just do a little bit just for the fun of it. I'm going to start a new conversation in Claude. I'm going to ask it show me any interesting patterns in this script event log file. It is a FileMaker server. I didn't actually give it a log file, so now I have to give it the log file. And this one's not too big, so it's probably within Claude's token window. So it's writing the entertaining thing about Claude or any of the models. It's realizing that it can't analyze this log very well all by itself, and so it's dynamically writing a Python script to do it for itself. Um, pretty interesting.
John, have you found that the tools or the models knowledge of like FileMaker event IDs is pretty up to speed, or do you ever encounter that it doesn't know what an error code should mean?
I have not found it to be a huge problem. Although to be fair, I haven't asked it to translate the codes much.
Hmm.
So when it summarizes and says there's a lot of error 301s, I haven't necessarily told it to substitute it in the meaning of the 301.
But yeah.
Um, but that said, when I was doing some of this initial work in ChatGPT, I created a GPT and gave it a whole bunch of FileMaker documentation and URLs to FileMaker documentation, help files, and everything. So when I was doing some of this initial work, ChatGPT had all that context of the information I had pre-pointed it at.
Hmm.
Um, and I think if in Claude you could certainly create a skill where you gave it all that stuff as well to give it more information up front. I have found that it goes out and gets all that information itself without much difficulty.
Nice.
Um, so we're probably outside of Claude's context window with this file, I'm going to guess. So it used the Python script that it wrote to find that there's some kind of big field validation error going on here. 863 million error events. So that would probably be a good thing to go look at. Now that took a little while. Used up a bunch of tokens. And we could just as easily do some of that by running predefined scripts. So this is where I started going further into having ChatGPT and later Claude help me write some scripts for analyzing the log files in different ways. At the time I was doing a lot of this, we have a client that runs FileMaker Server, and they're an older client where at one time they had a lot of FileMakers. People Claris loves at all of our clients and at all the FileMaker companies, where you've got a smart person who sees a problem and uses Claris to solve it. And this client at one time had a bunch of that, and they have like 9 or 10 different departmental FileMaker applications that are all completely independent of each other. Um, and these have been in place for 20 or 30 years, and they're in the process of they were in the process of trying to consolidate some of them, and we were upgrading to FileMaker Server 22. And so there was a lot of questions about how some of these applications were being used. And so I was writing a bunch of these scripts to try and answer some of those questions. Um, One thing that FileMaker Server doesn't really give you is a great view into the heaviest usage times on the server. And so some of these are trying to get at some of that information too. So I'm just going to pick a simple one. I think I've already got a log. Yeah, I've already got an access log file uploaded. So I'm just going to tell it, give me a file summary. And so this is going to give me a very simple HTML file of these are all of the files, FileMaker files that are being served on this server, and how many logins each file got in 2025 and 2026. So giving me an idea of what's being served and is it actually being accessed at all. I had to work with the AI engine there and Python a bit, trying to come up with a reasonable definition for what is a session. There's looking through the access log in detail. It's a little bit hard to say definitively what is an end user session. And because a user can log in and log out multiple times, they can get disconnected. Um, the script engine, the PSOS creates logins, and so you can have a lot of noise when you're starting to look at trying to figure out how many logins are there and what's the usage level on this server. If you're really just interested in end user clients connecting, um, it can be a little tricky to come up with the definitions so that you get accurate information. And I'm not even sure these scripts all are perfect on that, but that did take a little work to get that closer. Um, this script client version analysis, I think is one we will use on an ongoing basis because it lets us see um, whether or not we have any like version 19 clients logging in if we're working on a V22 upgrade. Um, this one gives us a good analysis over the length of the file, what client versions are in use and when did the last login occur. So I can see, okay, nobody's logged in with version 19 since 6 months ago, and so that's a useful one. Um, this access log summary, I think, is a particularly good one. I was trying to get a feel for how heavily loaded one of our client servers was. And I've since used this a few times. This is an example where I didn't want just numerical data. I also wanted to be able to see a little bit of a graph of the usage. And these are all vibe coded Python scripts. So at this point, we're not using AI at all, and it's not using up our token limits at all. So this script creates two summary pieces of summary information. One is text-based, so I can see the most recent login for each user that's logging in. I can see some information about how many users were logged in at peak times during every day in the log file, and some other summary information about that access log. And then perhaps of more use is the graph. So this is a graph of peak usage over the length of the log file. So I can see that my peak usage was 14 users logged in sometime in January of this year. That my peak usage load varies from 8 to 13 users on average. Everybody pretty much logs out at night. There's very little usage at night, or at least every day the usage drops down significantly. And this also can show me weekend usage. I can see usage levels dropping significantly during the week. But I've found this to be a particularly useful one because it's a little bit hard to get peak usage numbers and average peak usage numbers from just what you see in the FileMaker server logs directly. Continuing on, looking at a few more of these. This the script event summary one will do more or less what I tried to dynamically chat with Claude about a second ago. I'm going to upload a script event log and run this guy. So it's giving me the top 10 errors that are occurring in my log file, giving me an opportunity to hopefully focus my attention where it might be best directed in trying to fix errors that are showing up in my log file. In this particular log file or this particular script, I told it to leave out. I think I told it to leave out 301 errors. In an earlier version of this one, I had told it to leave out some other errors, like I think I had told it to leave out 401s. I ended up deciding to put it back in just for completeness. But I think this could be better managed if I gave it some user some radio buttons or something on there so that a user could say, I don't want to see 301s, I don't want to see 401s or whatever. There tends to be a lot of noise in the script event log because of errors that are hard to prevent FileMaker from logging. My most ambitious attempt at some of this log file stuff, I don't consider to be a complete success at the moment, but I was playing around with trying to make it easier to connect events that are occurring in the stats log, the client stats log, and the top call stats log. It can be very difficult to tell from what you see in the top call stats log whether or not you really have a problem or tracking down where the problem came from. So I was trying to make it easier to look at the the times where the servers has the biggest problem and relate that to entries in the client stats and top call stats log. So I'm going to upload these 3 log files. All right, so there we have 3 log files, the stats log, which is, I think, used to be called the server stats log, um, the client stats log, and the top call stats log.
I guess I just want to affirm that the cross log analysis probably is a really great use for this tool. That I it is more of a manual thing otherwise. Um,
Yeah, it's challenging. FM Perception tries to help you make use of it. Of course, that's a commercial product. Um, and this isn't, all this really does is try to help focus your attention on the area that might be the most important. I'm not sure, again, I'm not sure I really hit a home run with this one, but we can take a look at it.
I also can share that in my own manual log analysis, one of the things I often look for is based off of like the start time. Uh, any particular calls that are just taking a very long time to complete. Is that something that's captured in your tool or looked for?
Yeah, as soon as this finishes running, which will take a second or two, I'll show you what I did there.
Okay, sure.
I'd love to hear your feedback on that. That's a great question. I'm not doing that yet. I That's something that occurred to me because exactly of what you're pointing out. It's pretty hard to tell. Um, like I'll for everybody's benefit, I'll load up the file here, and we can. Yeah, and the advantage here is that we aren't using any tokens at all at this point. This is a Python script that I wrote with AI, so I used a bunch of tokens writing the script, but at this point we're not using any tokens yet, right at the moment anyway. So the script created this file. What I told it to do is give me the top 50 slowest operations by elapsed time per call. From the server stats log. And so that's what this file is. I think I also told it to give me the top 10. Yeah. So I told it to give me the top 50 slowest calls or the top slowest entries in the server stats log, plus the top 10 entries that had non 100 cache hits. So if I wanted to, and then what I told it to do is, okay, that's the slowest the server was based on elapsed time per call. Make it easy for me to get to the client stats log for that same time. So when I click view context, it takes me to that same time period of when the server was running really slow on elapsed time per call, and lets me see from the client side of things what was running at that time. Now, this isn't broken down by how slow anything was. This is just a straight list of the operations that were occurring around the time that the server stats log entry was running slow. It's showing me the client stats log entries from around my slow elapsed time per call period, and then it's showing me the top call stats entry for that slow elapsed time per call period. And this is where this whole thing breaks down a little bit at this point. I've been trying to put this together in a way that's useful, but I would not say I've successfully used it to diagnose much yet. And so I haven't really fine-tuned it. These windows of operations might not be big enough. I think, in fact, on this server, I think the thing that's leading this elapsed time per call to be so slow at this point is an accumulation of things that were happening before this window even started. So I'm not sure my context window here for the stats log is really big enough. And to point, it's of limited utility. I think, and this is based on a lot of internal discussions amongst our team. We're virtually certain that some of these field definitions are really problematic. And it would be a little bit helpful to have this translated into what actual table and field it was. And Vince's point that if I had the script referencing the XML um, um, information about the file, we could translate that to the actual field instead of numbers there, which aren't very helpful. Um, so that cross-log analysis one is my attempt to start trying to be able to burrow down and look at that information. For sure, I totally agree. It would be, certainly conceivable to to modify, to have a different um, to add to this. I mean, I'm not the one doing the coding, so the time is sort of, I wouldn't say it's irrelevant, but it wouldn't be that hard to add a pop-up menu here. Once you've uploaded the files, like there could be another button that said limit to user or something like that, and you could tell Claude to add a pop-up menu of all the users that are in the access log or the client stats log, and have it filter it based on that information. Again, the problem I mentioned early on, everything works pretty well most of the time, so you don't really have to look at this stuff. This particular server that we're looking at, these log files we're looking at now, is a database we inherited from another developer, and it has some dev styles that we've never implemented before, and that I've never seen before. And that's why I think these field definitions are the problem here. Um, but we haven't had to dig into the top call stats very much, and so it's hard to get good at something you don't practice much. That's sort of a work in progress. This whole thing I would characterize as a work in progress. I'd like to add some more scripts for doing other interesting things. Um, the part of the tricky part is coming up with the interesting things. So if people have ideas of scripts that would yield some interesting results for them or for other users, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd like to sort of continue working on this. This page is publicly available, but again, this is AI generated code. It's not AI. You're not directly talking to AI, so there's no context window. It doesn't require an account with any of the models. So if you feel like uploading a log file and playing around with it, feel free. I wouldn't call it a glitch, but one issue that you will have if you're not a little bit careful is that the utilities section here, where it will truncate the log file to a particular number of days, that will work with any log file. But the rest of them only work on whichever log file it it makes sense contextually, the access log or the script event log or whatever. But the main upload section here there's no checking. So if you upload an access log file and then try to run the script event, it will try to do it, but I don't even know what you'll get. I don't have it checking and throwing any errors if you upload the wrong kind of file. These are some of the resources I was using and have used for a long time for trying to learn more about top call analysis and log analysis. And then thank you. So that's basically the presentation. Love to chat more about log stuff if anybody has any questions or comments, and we have Connor on the call if anybody has any questions straight to Claris.
Sure. I appreciate you sharing. Even though I'm not myself really involved on the NPC side, I've got the request that I can pass along and just make sure they see that. But I think your explanation of the value makes a lot of sense. And of course, anything that we invest more into that helps with log analysis, I personally benefit from also. So I'm on board with all of these kinds of ideas.
Yeah, when you need it, you need it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I know some of the problems in the log file that we were just looking at. The top call stats log says query, but it's unclear. That's not very much detail about what's going on right then. And I suspect the problem is that from the database engine's viewpoint, that's all it is a query, and that's all you can log. But it doesn't give me much of a clue about where to look exactly.
Yeah, I think the shift that maybe needs to happen on our end is um, rather than building in logs that help our engineering team diagnose problems, to make these logs help you be able to diagnose problems, before having to get them to us. I guess this kind of like would be a Clay GPT, or for Claris to build our own. Yeah, it's an idea that I've heard, but I what a lot of what FileMaker does is us not building it for you, but just giving you the tools to build it. So I'm really not in a position to say what whether we would or wouldn't or aren't, but I understand the the need there for sure. And at the very least, the tools that are commonly used by folks, we are interested in making sure that they have access to, all the public information that there is about FileMaker. That was kind of where my earlier question about event IDs was coming from, but I'm sure it's not all perfect out there, but we are yeah, interested to make sure that it's not secret.
Claude Code does an awfully good job at a lot of this stuff. I'm not positive I think that there needs to be a dedicated Claris LLM. If you haven't tried Claude Code or Claude Desktop, you can ask it some pretty obscure Claris questions, and it's going to come up with some pretty interesting answers. Probably not as good as if Claris trained it more, but it's pretty good. You get some good feedback.
I can add for the specific kind of issue that you're describing where it terminated abnormally, really the more useful information there would be the crash dump. That I don't think is something that can necessarily be publicly translated, at least not on Windows. You might be able to see something out of it on Mac OS though, or Ubuntu. But in this case, was it a Mac? Okay. So yeah, that crash dump might have more information, and that should be human readable. It's like an IPS file, so it's possible that these tools could analyze about that.
I think we'd have to go and look at documentation for the FM data API log to
Yeah.
get much info out of this. It looks like it's logging every endpoint call.